talking to your parents about getting help at home or potentially moving out of their home can be one of the most difficult conversations you'll ever have. Today, I'm joined by Laura Lynn Morrissey, founder of Silver Savvy, who helps families navigate aging and care decisions with less conflict and more compassion. We discuss how to start these talks early, identify the right influencer in the family, and keep your parents' dignity intact. Laura Lynn also shares what to know about hiring home care, planning for assisted living, and avoiding mistakes with long-term care insurance. Whether your parents are fiercely independent or already need support, this episode will help you and your parents prepare for the future. Welcome to the Death Readiness Podcast. This is not your dad's estate planning podcast. I'm Jill Mastriani, former estate attorney, current realist, and your guide through wills, trusts, probate, and the conversations no one wants to have. If your Google search history includes, "Do I need a trust? What exactly is probate? And am I supposed to do something with mom's will?" You're in the right place. Today's episode was inspired by a question from Donna, a family friend from New York. We spent a few days together this summer at my dad's house in the Adirondacks, where she joined me on morning walks with the dogs. During one of those walks, she told me about a troubling family situation. Older relatives who were no longer safe in their home, and 4 adult children who were worried but unsure what to do next. Situations like Donna described are becoming more and more common as our population ages and care needs increase. A few days later, as I drove back home to Michigan, I queued up a few podcasts for the long ride. And that's when I first heard today's guest, Laura Lynn Morrissey. She was talking about exactly the kind of challenges Donna described, and I knew that she'd be an incredible resource for you too. Laura Lynn helps families make informed decisions about home health care and assisted living and navigate filing long-term care insurance claims. And today, she's here to help us make sense of it all. Here's my conversation with Laura Lynn Morrissey.
Hi, Laura Lynn. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Oh, I am so excited to be here, Jill. Thank you so much.
So what I am getting a lot of questions about from listeners is how they can have conversations with their aging parents about what types of care they maybe need now or need in the future. And a lot of times they don't know how to start the conversation. They also are anticipating some resistance from their parents. So I thought a good way for us to start out today would be sort of out of the gate with that almost most talked about question. How can we help our aging parents, and how can we do so in a way that's compassionate and empowering for them, but also action-oriented, because we a lot of times are seeing some real pain points that need to be addressed.
This is such an important topic. And, I think it's a topic I lived through myself. I made lots of mistakes. Even though I do this for a living, it's still hard when you, as I said, kids often see what their parents should be doing before their parents see what they should be doing. And so how I approach a situation where change is involved and, parents don't necessarily want to hear from their kids what they should be doing. Parents, as you get older, the goal, even for myself as I get older, I want to maintain my independence. So children of adult parents need to approach their parents from a perspective of preserving their independence, enabling them to maintain their dignity, and approaching them with language that doesn't come across as impacting that dignity, like you should or you need or you've got to, but approach it more from the perspective of, well, first of all, introduce the topic early. Unfortunately, a lot of times these topics are actually approached during a crisis. So getting in front of any topic when there is not a crisis is really key to success.
If you're listening today and you have older parents and they're fine, they're doing great, are you saying don't just say, okay, I'm just going to wait till there's a crisis and not worry about it? Now is actually the best time to start having those conversations?
I would agree. So, you don't want to talk about any of these situations or needs as a problem. You want to talk about them in terms of a preference. like myself, when I approached my mom, who was single, I would talk about some of the things that I was doing in order to prepare my own life care plan. So, Mom, I was kind of going through my paperwork the other day, and I was kind of wondering about you. I mean, you're living alone. Have you thought about who your next of kin would be should something happen? She was living with her twin, and, it started a conversation that was benign. It started a conversation that did not have any threatening tone to it. And I learned a lot about where my mother was in her planning process. And then from there, I started asking questions about how she would go about dealing with her independence. She lived on the second floor of the 2-story apartment building that the two of them owned. Had she thought about what safety measures were necessary and how long she actually wanted to stay in her home? So I approached it more from a preference perspective rather than, it's going to be a problem when you can't walk up and down these really steep stairs. Have you, what are your plans? And I was less accusatory. And I think a lot of times it's usually about the tone. I was lucky in that I was a pretty important influencer in my mom's life. So I was usually the one that people would come to in the family when we needed to approach my mother. So what I mean by influencer is somebody that is somehow able to, they've got this magic sauce where they're able to get people to listen where others might not be able to get people to listen. So, there's usually a son or a daughter or a friend. So if you want to begin approaching what might be considered a sensitive topic, especially around home care or moving out of your home that your parents may have lived in, approaching an influencer or kind of finding someone that parents, your mom or dad would listen to is also a key way to approach these conversations. I know I worked with a family. They had 6 kids. They had 6 kids, and they wanted to begin to talk to mom about dad potentially moving into an assisted living community. In fact, it was going to be in the dementia care unit. Mom had felt that it was her job to take care of her husband, but it was taking a toll on her, and he was getting out of the house at night. So it took one of the older sons to initiate the conversation with me.
So that older son, would you call him the influencer?
Well, initially I thought he was the influencer because he was super articulate. He was very pragmatic. He was calm. He didn't seem to have a lot of emotion. But come to find out, he was the one that was able to influence his brothers and sisters. There was a sister that was able to approach mom. So we were able to identify, and I was very open about this, who is the one that can best influence mom around this very sensitive topic? Who is the one that can, best influence the rest of you around what the best decisions are? And in this particular case, this was an incredible success story because everybody aligned. So the brothers and sisters were able to align behind the older brother in terms of, this is the best thing to do. And then the older sister was able to align with mom in helping her to understand that the quality of her life would improve if you enabled your loving husband to go into a community that would be able to provide him with safe and better care than what she was able to do.
So when you're talking about the influencer, I just want to make sure that we all understand what you mean by influencer. Someone who is influencing either the parents who need the care or also separately influencing other people in the family to take action in a certain direction. Is that right?
Absolutely. Sometimes families can do this on their own. They are able to navigate the dynamics of all of this, but sometimes they need to bring in someone like myself or someone who maybe in a legal standpoint or maybe a medical standpoint, but I provide sort of a neutral role in navigating what can be a pretty emotional topic, whether it be moving somebody out of the house, whether it be moving them, even modifying the house. I can't tell you how many times one particular member of the family wants to modify the house in order to bring parents downstairs to the first floor. So many houses are 2 levels where the bedrooms are upstairs. And other members of the family don't want to do that because they're afraid it's going to impact the value of the house when the time comes when they have to liquidate the house. So again, you use that process of finding out, who is able to kind of navigate this very difficult situation with a more pragmatic mind and with as little emotion as possible. And sometimes when you realize that conversation is too emotional, you have to take a step back and let things simmer, because it's important as family members that we don't push, because what ends up happening is you may end up instigating emotions that are going to be very difficult to unwind over time.
Okay. So even if you feel like this is an emergency, it's an urgent situation, things have gone too far, maybe assuming you can get it all wrapped up in one day is not a realistic runway for that.
I would absolutely agree with that. I think, again, starting as early as you possibly can when you start seeing a need, starting when there is no real problem, but more around preference, and identifying and even role playing. Approach loved ones, if you have a larger family, with, what are your thoughts around approaching these conversations as mom and dad get older? And you're going to definitely start to uncover people's own preferences around what they want to see from mom and dad. And getting in front of this before it becomes emotional is so important long term.
But I think also when you talk about having the influencers, a lot of times because the people in our everyday life, including myself, we don't necessarily know about all of the options that are available or perhaps not available for our loved one who is needing greater resources as they age. So someone like you coming in to educate the influencer about what's available based on their parents', specific circumstances can really make a big difference in getting people from just simply worrying about and agitating the problem to saying, oh, now we understand that these are our options for solutions, which makes best sense for us. And then the influencer, can take that information and move forward in conversations with the rest of the family. But without the expert to know what the options are, it can be difficult to get to that next step.
I grew up, the history in terms of my career was financial services. So I was with a very large financial services firm for a very long time. I had absolutely no insight into any of the work that I do now. When I started having challenges with my dad, who was very ill with brain cancer, and I learned very quickly just how difficult it can be to navigate crisis. Fast forward, I get out of financial services, I go into home care. I bought a couple of home care companies, and now I am in the middle of families dealing with crisis. So coming out of that and starting, once I sold my companies and starting Silver Savvy, I provide a lot of educational services as well as consultative services around just that helping families get in front of difficult conversations as early as possible is key. And I know when I did that with my mom, it was a lot easier. I found it much more constructive to get her to make decisions that were safe for herself versus waiting for crisis. But I think as the United States becomes older, in 6 or 7 years, there will be more people over 65 years of age than under 18. These kinds of conversations that we're having today, I think, are going to become a lot more common because there's going to be a lot more of us over 65 that are eventually going to need the services that, you and I provide. So the services that I see most common and most important are, number one, how do you keep your loved ones safe in the home as long as possible? Because most of us want to age in our homes because it's where our memories are, it's where our families grew up, and it's not necessarily our first choice to go into an assisted living or downsize. And so that is often one of the easiest things you can do for a loved one is to do an evaluation of what it's going to take to keep the home safe.
And so do you offer that as one of your services?
I do.
Okay.
I do. So I provide, at the very least, checklists that anyone can use to go through the house to identify areas that might become unsafe, to install and recommend different types of security measures like grab bars in the shower or lights that go on at night as you're navigating to the bathroom, sticky things under the rug to keep the rugs secure if you don't want to roll the rugs up altogether. Mm-hmm. So there's checklists that you can go through that can keep the home as safe as possible, while your loved one wants to remain in their home. And then kind of stepping up from that, home modifications. So if someone decides, I want to stay in my home, I want to move down to the first floor, I work with families to identify reputable tradespeople that can go into the home and actually understand how to modify the home in order to make it safe for people that are aging. Things like low threshold showers.
What is a low threshold shower?
So a low threshold shower can be anywhere where you literally can roll into the shower where the drains and the showers are modified so you no longer have to step into the tub.
Okay. Or if there's not a tub, are you talking about sort of the lip at the the front of the
That's right.
shower that you step over to get
That's
into
right.
it. Okay.
That's right. So there are tradesmen now that understand how to make a home safe and how to make the bathroom safe, how to make the hallways safe, how to build, appropriate ramps to enable people to get in and out of the house, more safely.
Just want to back up for a second. When you said that you can
Sure.
help identify tradespeople who can perform this work, is that in a specific geographic area that you will do that? Is that nationwide?
Nationwide. So everything that I do can be done nationwide. So I actually will identify, 3 to 4 tradesmen, and I will ask them all the necessary questions to best understand their capabilities. And then I present all of the information right down to, any pricing they'd be willing to provide to the family or to the loved one and say, here's who I found, here's my recommendation. And if they're nearby in the New England area, I will often participate in person. But we're able to do this remotely, again, working with a contact in the location so that they're obviously going to be responsible for coordinating some of the work that needs to be done. But yeah, all of the things that I do really right now are nationwide.
So what about, we talked about the sort of safety mechanisms you can put in the home up to and including modifications to the home. What about bringing someone in to actually provide home care for your loved one who is wanting to stay at home? I think that's one of the most difficult, hurdles to overcome for people is finding someone who can be trusted and who's, responsible to come when they're supposed to.
Absolutely. And I would say working in home care, I found a lot of misinformation. Families make a lot of assumptions as to what home care is and what home care should be.
What is home care then?
I look at it, home care is an extension of the healthcare system. And they have a really tough job because they have to balance being a friend to mom and dad while providing legitimate health support, keeping that person safe and providing, effective companionship. And then that can be a fine line for folks because at the end of the day, I think a lot of, what I deal with is folks will say, I want someone that my mom likes. But in essence, maybe there's a physical limitation. Maybe they're not able to take a shower. Maybe they're not able to get in and out of a chair. So there's a lot of healthcare skills that are really, really important that someone like myself needs to really take into account when evaluating a home care company. And so at the end of the day, I do take that pretty seriously that we do want someone that mom is going to connect with. But it's also just as important that the home care company is accredited and licensed, that they're insured properly with workman's compensation and other types of insurances, and that they're able to maintain the shift commitments and the resource commitments that often are required for, an assignment, and that they've got the reputation necessary to, keep someone like myself comfortable that the person isn't going to go into the house and commit any kind of fraud, which is a huge issue in today's society. There's a lot of scammers out there that are looking for opportunities to go into homes and take advantage. So that's another concern.
So do you actually help people find and vet home healthcare agencies that their parents can use?
Absolutely. So I start with getting an understanding of, and it could be, someone that is coming home from the hospital that needs to have home care for a short amount of time until they're able to take care of themselves functionally, or maybe it is a long-term a situation where maybe there's a chronic illness where it's important that there's an ongoing, number of folks that can provide support to keep that loved one safe. So what I do is I put together a list of wishes and wants, as well as a real clear understanding as to the physical needs of the person that's going to be supported. So I have a pretty clear understanding of what I call a care plan. I also have an understanding of who is this person? Who is the person that we're going to be caring for? Is it going to, how old are they? What was their career? What are their likes? What are their concerns? So I take all of that into account and I comb through all of the home care companies in that particular area and search for 4 or 5 reputable home care companies. And then I conduct interviews on my own by myself with those home care companies. And I ask them a series of 30 to 40 questions, depending on how the conversation goes. When I get all of that documented information, including pricing, I will then present all of those recommendations, including my preference. I will actually have an opinion as to who I think the best agency could be, but I don't say you need to go with this person or this agency. You can make the selection on your own because all of them will be reputable. And then we move forward with the process. I have found that, 50% of the time, the one that I've recommended is the one that the family will go with. But, I've also presented the other ones, so they may go with someone else. And it doesn't matter to me per se. I want the family and the loved one to feel as though they've got someone that cares, that's qualified, and that there are, enough resources to provide the care that they want. Because a lot of agencies out there today, they don't have enough caregivers and they're not able to cover shifts. And
Right.
families don't really understand that until they get into it. And then they're left stuck with either no care or families having to step up and provide care.
So once the family has chosen the home healthcare agency that they're going to be using, what's the next step? Are you involved in the next step?
So I am involved up until the first 2 weeks of care. And I do eventually step out for the most part because it is important that the agency have that autonomy to be able to manage the relationship going forward. So I would say 95% of the time I do step away, and the agencies have enough infrastructure and case managers to kind of take over the relationship. So again, back to your question. So I will participate in the initial selection.
Mhm.
I will participate in developing that care plan and making sure that it's as comprehensive as it needs to be. It's not that I overshadow what the agency is doing. I just make sure that there's a really, really strong handoff. I actually monitor feedback on both sides. How was the first shift? How was the caregiver? Was it to your expectation? Then I monitor how they feel after the first week. And then when I feel comfortable that things are moving along in a more of a routine fashion, then I will say, it's time for me to step out. It's time for the agency to work directly with you ongoing. And of course, I'm available if there's an issue or if, ad hoc, I need to step in. I do provide a service ongoing, which is what I call case management. And that would be more of an ongoing, I'm an intermediary and I'll provide all of that. I'll run interference, but it can be a little bit more complex, and that's more expense to the family to have to provide that level of support. So I typically want the family to work directly with the agency.
So what would be an example of case management? What would that look like?
So say you have, I worked with a family, husband and wife lived in an assisted living community, and the son, who was the healthcare proxy, was living in California, and the couple lived in Massachusetts. So the son could not effectively be, in person to support the parents. He was on the phone with them quite a bit. They did Zoom calls and whatnot. So he asked if I would stay involved and conduct periodic check-ins, make sure that parents were happy. And it was that additional layer of support that he felt comfortable having me stay involved. And I worked with the agency beautifully. I did not overstep my role. I did not make decisions on their behalf. And in fact, we had a kind of a role clarity meeting so that the couple understood what my role was versus the home care company. So it was very, very clear when I would be involved and when I would, expect the agency to be involved. And it worked out beautifully. And I've done that several times. I will also provide physical support in the area. I'm in the New England area, so I will drive to a client's home and, participate with them in going to the doctors if they don't have someone who can provide that support, taking notes and communicating effectively out to families, again, for those that are out of state or out of town.
Okay, so that's a sort of a higher touch level of support in person that you can provide sort of within the New England area because you're based out of the Boston, Massachusetts area.
That's correct.
Okay, so it's still on the topic of helping our aging parents, but what if staying at home for whatever reason is not an option? What if there needs to be a move to assisted living or perhaps to a nursing home? Where and how do you come in that situation?
Assisted living communities have become such an important part of our aging dynamic. And I think that there's a lot of great information out there, but there's a real need to clarify what's been happening over the past, I'd say 10 years around assisted living communities. Number one, given the number of, the family dynamic where so many of us live further away from our loved ones, assisted living communities have become an important component of enabling a loved one to stay connected with activities, to stay socially engaged, to ensure their nutrition is taken care of, to provide them with a safe apartment to live in, and if need be, nursing assistants to come in and provide assistance with, showering and dressing and what have you. The challenge with so many of us getting older and so many of us being interested in assisted living is the fact that the waiting lists have become a lot longer.
Okay.
So again, I go back to the discussion around if it's a conversation you've had with your parents and they say, yeah, eventually I'm going to downsize and I want to move to assisted living. It's important for folks to understand that those wait lists for the assisted living communities you want to be, that you want to live in, there's somewhere around 2 to 3 years wait. And so if it's something that you're really, really interested in, it's probably important to get on those wait lists right away. So the services that I provide is I provide support with selection. So similar to what I do with home care, I sit down with the loved one and I ask them a series of questions around their preferences, their wishes, their wants. I get an understanding of any health challenges they may be facing or any future health challenges that they may be facing if they have a chronic issue. And I get a really well-rounded picture of who that person is and what their desires are. I then look at, how far away do you want to live from where you live now? And I get a sense for that circumference, that area where I can look. I am very familiar with a lot of the communities in the New England area. So I actually have my preferences. So I'll put together a list of who I think would make sense. I will conduct, again, the same thing, interviews with those assisted living communities based on my experience of what I think is important that families need to know. Again, this is a nationwide search. Then I will do the same thing in other states. I may not necessarily know those communities, but I know what questions to ask because it's not always just about the chandeliers and the menu and the activities. It's so much more than that. I look at the health of the company running the assisted living community in terms of their financial ability to stay in business, because that's a big challenge right now in the industry, as well as their record for safety, as well as what amount of care they're able to provide. There are different levels depending on what state you're in. Because I think one of the most important things that families need to understand is that these are non-medical communities. I'm talking about assisted living versus nursing home. And so many families don't really understand that. So I come back to the family with, here's what I've learned. Here are the communities that I have found that I think would be suitable. Here's my recommendation. If they're within the New England area, then I will actually go out with the families on visits, because a lot of folks want to go out and see the communities and be able to tour them. But if it's nationwide, then I'll work with my point of contact and they will facilitate the visits. But they're armed now with all of this information that can help them conduct a more informed tour and then subsequently, make a decision. So I can't tell you how many times they'll go out on tour and then come back and say, I think we're going to wait for a little while. What's that again we can do to keep the house safe?
Well, so wouldn't they need to wait a little while anyway if the wait time is 2 to 3 years for assisted living? So even if they said they wanted to do it today, that's probably not an option. So they probably do need to sort of get the house retrofitted to accommodate them.
Absolutely. Or we would organize some other short-term solution. Yeah, I think that's the one thing that is really important for people to know is that assisted living is not about, I used to be able to place people within a 30-day period, and now it's, markedly changed. They can't build assisted living communities fast enough.
All right. So earlier when we were talking about care at home, you mentioned, okay, if somebody's leaving the hospital and they need care at home, how you might step in and provide assistance there. But a lot of people might be thinking, well, maybe they shouldn't come home from the hospital until they're ready, until they still need care. But what have you been seeing? What is trending in terms of hospital discharges and the level of care individuals are still needing after discharge from a hospital?
It's interesting. I do a lot of community speaking, and one of the first questions that I ask, depending on my topic, is, how many of you have a mom or dad that you feel has come home from the hospital way too soon? And 9 out of 10 hands will go up. And I tell people that this is the way it is going forward, and I'll tell you why. Hospitals now are managed more like a business than ever before. And what I mean by that is they have goals and incentives in order to achieve the reimbursements that they receive from insurance companies as well as Medicare. And so what's happened over the past 15, 20 years, and all of us have seen all of these private practices be rolled up and these huge healthcare systems be developed, where years ago you would have all of these disparate support systems. You could go to your doctor you chose, you could go to a hospital that you chose, and you would have the care that you felt you need. And doctors had a lot of independent decision-making authority that now has been rolled up into these healthcare systems. And so what's happening is folks are going into the hospital and they're being discharged when they are medically able versus functionally able. And so what that means is that they're medically stable so that they may not be able to, where they would normally go to rehab in order to have physical therapy to regain, a larger percentage of their strength. And you'd be in rehab for, 30 days, let's say. You're now going home. And so what we call that is a hospital to home setting. And so hospitals are expecting families to coordinate this hospital to home setting where mom or dad comes home. They're still, in your mind, in an acute setting, but they're medically stable. And then you're expected now to coordinate your visiting nurses, your physical therapy, your occupational therapy, or any other, medical provider where, years ago you would have all of this done in the hospital until that patient was functionally stable, where they could walk on their own or they could dress themselves. And so all of that, from a savings perspective, is now put on the families. And so 85 million people wake up every day with family caregiving responsibilities. And they're usually pretty surprised that they're now being asked to take care of a loved one, where before, we could expect them to be in the hospital for a week or two. I mean, how many of us, I have a loved one that had a knee operation, a knee replacement, and they were home the next day. It is amazing how quickly people are discharged. And so what does that mean? So I actually have a series of helpful guides that families can use to make sure that their homes are set up so that it can provide the care and the space for that loved one when they come home, right down to what items do they need to buy, from bandages to other types of supplies that the VNA may or may not supply. Because a lot of people think, well, the VNA will just bring it, and that's not always the case.
What is VNA? Oh, the visiting nurse.
The visiting nurses, sorry.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Visiting nurses, yeah. And also to add, what I've seen is, especially people that are being discharged, say on a Friday afternoon, that's a very popular time for people to be discharged, is Friday afternoon, because it's expensive to keep a patient in the hospital through the weekend and have them discharged on Monday. So you'll see a lot of discharges on Friday afternoon, and they'll often ask the families to hire a professional caregiving company to come in for at least 48 hours to make sure that that loved one is safe. And so I think it's important to get in front of all of that in the event that, that's something that you're being asked to do.
So if you have a loved one who's hospitalized, you shouldn't be assuming that that person will not come home until they're, what did you call it, functionally able to walk, dress themselves, go to the bathroom on their own, that the hospital is not waiting for that level of function. They're just sending them home so long as they are what they determine medically stable, which does not mean that they're capable of taking care of themselves.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of reasons around all of that. It's around cost savings. It's around, we're dealing with a number of different pressures that the healthcare system is facing. There's a lack of doctors, and some areas of the United States are worse than others. There's a 60,000 primary care physician shortage right now, and there's various other pressures that the healthcare system is facing that has led to these changes in how we receive care. And so, at the end of the day, if someone is coming home, if they're not able to walk on their own, then, having a walker for a time so that they can lean on something while they're moving from their bed to wherever they need to go, or a cane, having, a commode for a little while with a screen in front of it or some sort of privacy. So I have a checklist that provides insight as to, what would a hospital to home setting look like, in order so that you're not scrambling, and you're on Amazon or you're running down to the drugstore.
We can link to the checklist in the show notes for anyone who's interested. So the other question that I hear a lot has to do with long-term care insurance. And people who have long-term care insurance are super proud that they have it. People who don't have it worry a lot that they don't have it. But even having a long-term care insurance policy, it unfortunately doesn't mean that you're taken care of, right? What are the problems that you're seeing when people are, filing a claim with the long-term care insurance that they're ready and they need coverage? Are you seeing anything in terms of claims being denied?
Yeah, absolutely. When the idea of long-term care insurance was invented, in the 80s, a lot of people bought these extremely rich policies that had incredible benefits. And then over time, insurance companies, I don't mean to be snide or, sarcastic here, but insurance companies, they had a perspective that not everyone's going to keep these policies, like life insurance. A lot of people, there's a large percentage of people that let their life insurance policies go. They'll have them for a little period of time, then they realize they don't want to pay the premiums anymore, and they let them go.
So when you say let them go, they simply stop paying the premiums on their insurance, and then they no longer have the insurance.
That's right. They will cancel their policies. They'll say, don't want to pay that money anymore, and they'll cancel their policies.
Okay.
A lot of folks feel that certain types of insurance is nice to have. And insurance companies were betting that that would be the case with long-term care insurance. Well, guess what? People kept their long-term care insurance. And then eventually insurance companies needed to start paying out these very rich benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, insurance companies began to offload that part of their business, where you had, 15, 20 insurance companies providing long-term care insurance. It's now whittled down. I think there's 5 or 8 companies that provide long-term care insurance. And the policies of today look very different than they did years ago.
But what if you have a policy from the 80s?
That said, so what's happening now, folks that are in their, 60s, 70s, and 80s who bought these policies, the insurance companies are certainly still honoring those policies, although it may not be the original company that issued the policy. But that said, they're going to honor the policies. But what I'm seeing is an increased level of scrutiny by the insurance company in terms of your qualifications to receive benefits. And families on the other side have this impression that this is kind of like a Geico policy. This is like a car insurance policy where if I simply file a claim, I will get coverage. And that's not the case. The insurance companies will scrutinize your claim to make sure that you actually are in the condition that you say you're in, that you actually need the care that you say you need. And there is upwards of 20 to 25% of all claims will be denied outright.
And then what happens? What happens if it's denied outright? Can you then file the claim again with different circumstances? I don't know what the change would be.
I can give you an example. So I worked with a family. They didn't know me at the time after they had been denied. I took a look at the paperwork that they filed. The claim documentation itself from the insurance company, it looks pretty straightforward. It looks like it's pretty simple to fill out, but there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. So it's very important what I saw with this particular claim that was denied. There was a lack of information around the diagnosis. The doctors did not provide the right information around the diagnosis. So again, there was a gap in information sent to the insurance company. And the assessment, so when you file an insurance claim, a long-term care insurance claim, most times you will have a physical person come out. They're usually a nurse from the insurance company that will do an assessment, and it's usually about an hour and a half. And you have to answer a lot of questions around your current state and whether or not. And so there's a lot of opportunities to not answer the questions in a way the insurance company wants, given that, because we're not in the business of
the way the insurance company requires in order for them to fulfill your claim. Okay.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so as a result, you'll get denied. And so I work with clients to correctly fill out that paperwork, make sure that the doctors understand what we're trying to do and that they provide the most robust information, including cover letters that advocate why this long-term care insurance policy should pay benefits. And then I will coach the family, I will coach the policyholder on how to answer all of the questions that will most likely be asked. For instance, a lot of us who are very proud to be aging well, we do not want to acknowledge that we may not be able to tie our shoes well anymore. And maybe we've stopped wearing shoes that tie. Maybe we wear shoes with Velcro, or maybe we wear slip-ons. And so you've been able to modify your living routines to accommodate your limitation, but it doesn't mean you still don't have your limitation. Your ability to dress yourself because you have a condition that impacts your back you still are unable to wear the shoes that you always wore, and now you wear slip-ons. So the answer to the question when they say, are you able to dress yourself? The answer is, I am not. I am not able. It's like I tell people, it's the test you don't want to pass. I am not able to dress myself. I can no longer tie my shoes, and you leave it at that. You can say, of course, I wear slip-ons. You're being honest. You have to kind of swallow your pride, even though it's hard, because you're entitled to these benefits you've been paying for if, in fact, you have a condition that warrants. Another question that comes up, are you able to shower yourself every day? That's another area that you can get assistance with. And the answer is, I bathe myself. A lot of people use the sink, and they'll give themselves a little sitz bath, or they'll give themselves a little, sponge bath, because they can't get into the shower on their own and they're embarrassed to say anything. And so I encourage people that this is a safe place to answer the questions around your care so that they can understand that the conditions that you're living in, regardless of what you've done to change your routines on a daily basis. And that has helped the loved one and the policyholder to present themselves in a way that enables the agent's insurance company to make the appropriate decision and basically pay out the claims. But it doesn't end there, Jill. A lot of these companies now, once you are approved and they begin to pay out, your policy, they will want to schedule an assessment 30 to 60 days, and you go through the process again. And I think families need to understand that. I'm working with a woman right now. Her policy will pay out over $12,000 a month. She submitted to an assessment over the phone after breaking her back. And she said, I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good.
No.
Yeah, I'm doing much better. Yeah, so they canceled their claim. And so I'm working with the insurance agency right now to appeal that denial because her condition, in fact, has gotten worse. But she's a very positive person. And,
Right.
The sun is always shining and her glass is always full. And so she did not understand that the phone call was really what she didn't understand.
It wasn't a
the
friendly
intention of the phone
call. It was a call to assess her circumstances.
That's it.
So you help people file a claim initially, but you also help if someone has filed a claim and that claim has been denied, you help to appeal that denial. Is that right?
Absolutely. I actually help. I will file the claim from start to finish. And if long-term care insurance can provide so many different benefits, so it's hard to talk about every single thing these insurance policies enable. But for the most part, the big items are they allow accredited home care, a licensed home care company to come in, and the insurance company will pay for that service after the elimination period.
What is that time period exactly?
So the elimination period, I like to equate it to a deductible. A lot of policyholders forget that when they signed up for this policy, that they elected a certain elimination period. And that is the period of time after the claim has been filed where you will pay for whatever services, whether it's assisted living or home care, until your claim is approved. And families don't always understand that. They think, I filed a claim. The insurance company will reimburse me right away. And that's not the case. It's a 30-day or a 60-day or 120-day. Or if you have a very generous policy, it could be 0. But at the end of the day, it's a period of time that you must pay out of pocket on your own for whatever services you're filing the claim for.
So even if your claim is approved, the insurance company is not going to pay for any care you're receiving during this, what we call the elimination period, which can be anywhere from 0, 30, 60, 90 days. So during that elimination period, even if your claim is approved, you're going to pay out of pocket for services until that time period has expired.
That's correct.
Okay.
I spend a lot of time talking about that because it is a pain point because care is expensive. And so what I try to do is I will coach families on how to navigate that elimination period the least expensive way possible. So what's the least amount of care that you can get away with, if you will, and satisfy that day of elimination period?
Well, Laura Lynn, this has been so helpful. Thank you very much. Can you tell us where we can find you if we want to reach out and chat about your services?
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for letting me share my experience and my knowledge. I think the work that you do is so important, and it's a pleasure. You can reach me on hello@silversavvy.com. I am also on LinkedIn under Laura Lynn Morrissey. I am also at lauralynn.m@silversavvy.com, but it's probably easier to just hello@silversavvy.com.
And we will include all of this information in the show notes for anyone who's interested.
Lovely.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to Laura Lynn Morrissey of Silver Savvy for sharing so much valuable information today. I'll include links in the show notes to the home safety checklist Laura Lynn mentioned earlier, as well as her Smart Start Kit, a great resource to help you or your parents begin creating a life care plan. Remember, this process isn't just about logistics. It's about making sure you and your loved ones have choices that preserve dignity and reduce stress for everyone involved. Most of all, it's about making sure the person at the center of it all has a voice in shaping their own future. Thanks, as always, for listening. This is Death Readiness, real, messy, and yours to own. I'm Jill Mastriani, and I'm here to help you sort through it, especially when you don't know where to start.
Hi, I'm April, Jill's daughter. Thanks for listening to the Death Readiness Podcast. While my mom is an attorney, she's not your attorney. The Death Readiness Podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It does not provide legal advice. For legal guidance tailored to your unique situation, consult with a licensed attorney in your state. To learn more about the services my mom offers, visit deathreadiness.com.